The alien hives from one-page rules are getting a model update, which means I need to give my force an update too. Alien Hives is actually one of the few Grimdark Future factions I made a small force out of. Since I tend to lean more fantasy when it comes to the enjoyment of the games, I haven't really fleshed out other forces I've painted some models for, like I have with the Alien Hives. But now that some aliens are getting redone and others are getting more weapon variety, it makes sense to update how I paint them a little as well. Because when I did them the first time around, I went with a simple process. But that process didn't have something that I have now: contrast paint. So now I'm going to do a little showcase of what I've done so far for the small force, and then break out the paints and add a new model with the same scheme and technique, but see if I can't use the contrast to make it even easier than it was with the washes. As for what's getting updated with the current month's Alien Hive models, well, the Shooter and Assault Grunts don't change much, but they do get a few friends to join them. The Warriors get a little bigger and a ton more weapon options for both the unit and the different prime varieties. The Burrower gets huge, with some extra weapon options too. The Carvo Rex gets some weapon options as well for his back to bear, and the Tyrant Beast is all new from top to bottom, which gives him lots of character and detail. First on the list of models I have done for the army are the ones I've done for videos. So these Alien Hive Guardians were done for a video on getting a Zenithal Prime with an airbrush, can, and brush. These are kinda where I worked out my color scheme at first. These warriors I primed on camera for some airbrush tips, but I can't quite remember if I painted them on camera too. Either way though, they did get finished, so get to be included in my force. This big guy was done for a video where I got the one-page rules Discord community to vote on what color scheme I should use for it. They didn't make it easy, that's for sure, and doesn't quite match up what I did for myself. But as a practice to see what I could do with it, I painted up the warrior he's paired with here. So they're not matching, but they are usable. This piece was also a one and done for a video with a challenge, where I used my most frayed and grossest brush, and only that, to paint him with some simple techniques. So I did get to use my color scheme still, just not the same method, and the brush wasn't helping anything either. But he's not that far off, so fits in well still. Since I was only planning a skirmish force with these, I only painted up one Soul Snatcher. But the other reason for that is I only got into OPR after the month's release of the Soul Snatchers, which means the only one available to me at the time was the free one from Cults 3D, which is where I got him from. And lastly, a few things I painted on my own were the Ravenous Beast, solely because I really like the model and had some room on a print bed, and some Assault Grunts, because up until this point, all of my units were kinda pricey on the points, so needed something cheap to get some bodies. And the very last one is this Venom Floater. He was one of the first models I printed on my Mars 3 with the new resin, and I wanted to give it a challenge to see how well it would work. With all those crazy arms, it was a great case study for the resin's strength, and I tested some things on it painting wise, so while it's the right colors, it's not quite the same as the rest. Now that we've seen the force, what am I adding? Well, I don't quite have a leader beam yet, so I'm going to add a warrior prime, one with some new war gear not previously available. And before I get started, I just wanted to point out how much bigger these guys are now compared to their previous incarnations. Not that I couldn't have scaled them up myself before, but this is their officially pre-supported size now. To get them started, I'm going to start with exactly the old process, which was to base coat in some pretty opaque but still vibrant colors. And I want to say that I went into the Alien Hives trying to keep them simple so that I'd actually get them finished easily for the tabletop, so don't expect a really wow final product here. That said, I'm just starting with a Chimera Red Oxide base coat from my airbrush over a gray prime. From there, I start to pick out all the flesh parts with a brown instead of the red oxide. Before I think it was a mix of Chimera paints, but this time around I have this Joe Sanja Brown Earth, which is a blend of red oxide, black, and brown pigments, but goes on so opaque, which just makes things even more simpler, since no mixing needed. Now that I've got some colors down, this is when I break out the white and do some zenithal. This was kind of the original point of this color scheme, that putting down some colors before the zenithal instead of just white over black, I can really give the model way more saturation in the end and vary the hues under the washes. So with the advent of Slapchop, this idea still rings true to me, just that by adding some color under the zenithal as an extra step, it can really make a difference in the final. Before finishing this model up, I just want to share a few links you should check out in my description. The first is to my Patreon. This month, I've got an STL of a very cool cat to share, as well as a video on how I painted his fur, as well as a link to the Dragon Trappers Lodge channel, where I've done a video on how to paint their free model this month. This is where the new stuff comes in. Before, when I painted them, I did so with thinned paint for the green and some inks and army painter wash for the purple. But this time around, I want to use my contrast equivalents, dipping inks. Now I don't think it's going to be as easy as just going from 1 to 1, so I'm going to have to try a few mixes to get the matches. But I don't mind that, as the original washes were all mixes too, either with medium or inks. But I'll have to pick my colors carefully. For purple, I have two options: Garnet Purple, which is more magenta, and Nightshade Purple, which is more on the blue side of things. Separate, not quite a good match, but together, now I'm actually getting close. It just needs to be a bit darker. And well, the only dark dipping ink is this zombie, and luckily just adding that gets me well within the range of my original wash color. For the green, I used quite an earthy style olive green from the Scale Artist line for that wash, but the dipping inks don't really have anything like that, except this zombie that I already brought out. It's just too dark, so I'm thinking I'll make it just a bit more vibrant with this acid green. Not a lot, but enough to take it from dull to semi-vibrant. Now I just have to get them on the model. I'll start with the green so that I can fill in the trim around the plates, and I won't have to be specific with the purple. I'm only going to do one coat at first and then let it dry and see where that leaves me, because not all contrasts are made equal within their individual lineups even, so better to start light than trying to go overboard. The purple is going to be for all the plates. With my previous combo of the purple wash and black, it wasn't as staining, so it didn't cover the white completely in a single coat. So if these dipping ink purples have at least one of them that stains a little bit more, then I might be able to get away with this in just one coat. But we'll have to wait until this all dries to see what we actually get in the end. Now that it's dry, I can say the green worked really well. The staining power of the acid green made the white vibrant in short order, so that color only needed one coat and looks really good with the brown shadows but overall green tone. The purple worked surprisingly well too. It didn't quite cover the white zenithal completely, but it did filter it so I don't see the specks, and it is purple in hue, just with some spots lighter than others, which works to my benefit. The last thing I'll show off is just how I did my bone color, and it starts off predictably lazy by using what's already on my palette, the red oxide, and a pre-mixed bone from the Scale Color Artist line, Buff. I'll start with just a little bit of that into the red oxide to lighten it up. Then I'll just re-base coat all my bone weapons, claws, spikes, teeth. If it's sharp, it's getting covered, but not completely. Since my shadows already started from the red oxide, I don't need to go all the way into the base of things and can pull the paint out of the shadows towards the tips of all these spikes. For a highlight, I'm just going to take the base buff color and add a bit of the last mix into it. I'll use this to layer up on all the bone. For the claws, I'm just going to generally cover the center of each side of the claw. For small things like teeth, just a quick touch highlight is good enough for the complexity I'm going for. And for the actual spikes, I'll do what I did before, pulling the paint from the inside to the tip, but near the base, I'll let it spike out some so that there's a little more texture in that base. Then for the last color, it's just going to be the pure bone color, with just some added thinner to keep it a bit transparent. Then for the small things, once again, I'm just going to take care of the tips and edges. They're a bit too small to really worry about any blending that might occur, but on the large spikes, I'll do kind of what I did with the medium layer, where I filled in the tip, but then added some texture spikes going down towards the base. I'll try and make them a little finer than the last ones. So the one big thing I noticed between this method with the contrast versus the washes I used is that this one is way more vibrant. So even though I matched the colors pretty well, I think they just react differently over the zenithal. But in a good way. I think it turned out pretty great from that vibrancy. The skin and the plate really seem like their own things now, and can stand out that little bit more on the tabletop where they'll be. If you liked this video, please subscribe. And if you'd like to support my channel, check out my Patreon where I have new models and videos each month for you to print and paint.